There is a pasta sauce brand that has been the best-selling jar in America for over 40 years, and it has almost nothing to do with why you actually keep buying it. It is not the taste. It is not the price. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what has been keeping that jar in your cart every single week. I pulled the ingredient panel straight off the manufacturer sites and current retail listings for every brand in this video, and cross-checked the nutrition numbers against independent food databases, so nothing here is a guess or a leftover claim from an old label redesign. 5 sauces are going back on the shelf. 3 are actually worth the money. The most purchased sauce in the country is saved for last. And once you see what's actually funding its shelf space, you'll understand why almost nobody stops to check. Let's get into it. Number 5. Bertolli tomato and basil, the one built to look imported. Bertolli sells the word Italian harder than almost any other brand in this aisle. The font, the color palette, the since 1865 heritage story printed on the label, all of it is doing one job, making you believe this jar crossed an ocean to get to your cart. It didn't. Bertolli pasta sauce is owned and manufactured in the United States by Mizkan America, a Japanese headquartered condiment company that acquired the North American Bertolli sauce business from Unilever in 2014 and licensed the name. The sauce is produced at Mizkan's own domestic plants, not in Tuscany, and it never has been. Now look at what's actually in the jar. Tomato puree, diced tomatoes, sugar, then extra virgin olive oil, then onions, salt, garlic, spices, natural flavor. Olive oil sits after sugar on that list, which under standard labeling order means there's more added sugar in this jar by weight than there is the ingredient the entire brand identity is built around. Open it and the texture is smooth and slightly syrupy, coating a spoon the way a sauce with real oil content generally doesn't. You're not tasting a sauce made with olive oil. You're tasting a sauce that lists olive oil in a smaller quantity than the sweetener sitting one spot above it. The label is selling heritage and geography. The ingredient panel is selling a licensing deal, a domestic production line, and a sugar ratio dressed up as authenticity. $4 to $6 for a jar where the thing you're paying the premium for barely registers in the actual formula. The next brand doesn't bother with the Italian story at all, and somehow that almost makes what's inside more disappointing. Number 4, Hunt's Traditional, the one that doesn't even try to hide it. Hunt's is priced like the honest budget option, and there's something almost respectable about a sauce that isn't dressed up in a fake village illustration or an invented grandmother. But open the ingredient panel and honesty isn't really what's happening here either. Tomato puree, water, then high fructose corn syrup, then modified potato starch, salt, sugar, citric acid, spices, natural flavor. High fructose corn syrup sits second or third depending on the can size you buy, ahead of the salt, ahead of the spices, ahead of nearly everything that's supposed to make this taste like a tomato and not a sweetened starch slurry. Owned by Conagra Brands, one of the largest packaged food companies in the country, Hunt's runs 530 to 560 milligrams of sodium per half cup, depending on the exact retailer listing, which works out to roughly a quarter of a full day's recommended intake in 4 tablespoons of sauce. Modified potato starch is doing the thickening work a properly reduced tomato base should be doing without help, and you can feel it. The sauce clings in a slightly gluey way rather than reducing into something that naturally coats the pasta. This isn't a simple, honest, 4-ingredient product the way the plain can suggests. It's a sweetened, starch-thickened one, wearing an unpretentious label so you assume simplicity without ever checking whether that assumption holds up. The brand right behind it charges 3 times as much and asks you to trust a glass jar instead of a can. Number 3, Classico tomato and basil, the one that charges you for the container. Classico is packaged in glass, and the glass is doing a meaningful share of the selling. Smooth, uniform sauce with almost no visible tomato pieces. A name that sounds classical without actually meaning anything specific about the recipe. To the brand's credit, the current formula does carry a genuine no sugar added claim, which is a real improvement over versions of this sauce sold in past years, and that deserves to be said plainly rather than buried. The ingredient list: tomato puree, diced tomatoes in juice with citric acid and calcium chloride, then under 2% of onions, salt, basil, olive oil, garlic, spices, and natural flavor. Here's the part worth sitting with. Citric acid shows up as an added ingredient in a product whose base ingredient, tomatoes, is already naturally one of the more acidic foods that exists. When a tomato sauce needs supplemental citric acid layered on top of that natural acidity to hit its intended flavor profile, that's usually a signal the tomatoes going into this particular formula weren't concentrated or ripe enough to get there without help. Natural flavor closes whatever gap is left after that. The texture holds a uniform, almost velvety smoothness with no chunk variation at all, which is achievable at scale but isn't really what a home-simmered tomato sauce looks like. $5 to $7 for a jar where the packaging, not the tomato sourcing, is carrying most of the price difference over the cheaper cans on this list. 2 brands left on the avoid side, and both of them are counting on decades of shelf familiarity to keep you from asking the same question you just asked about Classico. Number 2. Ragu Old World Style Traditional. The one betting you won't ask why. Ragu has been on American shelves since 1937, and Old World Style is about as aspirational as pasta sauce naming gets, implying a recipe carried carefully across generations from an actual kitchen. The current ingredient list, pulled directly from Ragu's own site: tomato puree, soybean oil, salt, sugar, dried onions, dried garlic, spices, garlic powder, onion powder. Soybean oil is the second ingredient, not olive oil, not a finishing garnish, and industrial seed oil sitting directly behind the tomato base. It's in the formula because a thin tomato and water base doesn't have enough body on its own to feel like a finished sauce, so oil gets added to simulate a richness the tomatoes alone aren't providing. Ragu is owned by the same parent company as Bertolli, Mizkan America, which means 2 of the 5 brands on this avoid list, marketed as opposite ends of the shelf, one premium and imported sounding, one everyday and budget position, are actually made by the same company using the same category of shortcut to get body into a thin base. Around 480 milligrams of sodium per half cup, and a formula that reaches for oil instead of better tomatoes to solve its core texture problem. If this is the first jar on this list you've actually had sitting in your own kitchen right now, drop a comment with which one surprised you most. It genuinely helps to see what people are still reaching for out there without realizing it. Number 1. Prego Traditional, the best-selling pasta sauce in America, and the reason you clicked on this video. Prego launched nationally in 1981 under Campbell Soup Company, and its original claim to fame was solving a real manufacturing problem: an anti-weeping process that kept the sauce from separating into a watery liquid the way some competitors did at the time. That's a legitimate piece of food science history, and it's genuinely part of why the brand became a default in so many kitchens through the 80s and beyond. But default isn't the same thing as good, and 40+ years of shelf presence isn't earned through flavor alone every single year. It's earned by becoming the jar you reach for without thinking, because you've reached for it every week since before you were the one doing the grocery shopping. Here's the current ingredient list: tomato puree, diced tomatoes in tomato juice, sugar, then under 1% of salt, canola oil, dried onions, dried garlic, spices, basil, citric acid, onion extract, garlic extract. Sugar is the third ingredient, ahead of the salt, ahead of the oil, ahead of every herb and spice in the formula. In a jar built around a vegetable that's naturally sweet when properly ripened, that placement isn't a seasoning choice. It's a correction for tomatoes that weren't sweet enough on their own before processing began. The number that actually reframes this jar is the sodium. Prego's own product page lists their standard traditional sauce at 470 milligrams of sodium per half-cup serving. And they sell a separate lower sodium version, specifically engineered to undercut that number by 25%. When a company sells a quieter version of its own flagship product for the specific purpose of reducing the sodium load, that's about as clear an admission as you'll get that the original number is worth questioning before you pour it, and a half cup is a small, almost token pour. A realistic single serving over a full plate of pasta runs closer to a cup and a half, which pushes the actual sodium delivered in a real dinner well past what that half-cup serving size on the label is designed to imply. Prego sits on more shelves than anything else in this video because it became the automatic choice before most people ever had a reason to flip the jar over and check. 12 minutes to a finished dinner, a familiar red label, a cart that's already moving toward checkout. That's the entire story behind the best-selling pasta sauce in the country. Condensed into one sentence. Familiarity beats scrutiny, and it's been winning that fight for over 40 years running. Now here's what to reach for instead. These three brands looked at the same cost pressures and the same shelf competition as every jar you just saw and made a fundamentally different set of decisions from the first ingredient down. Best option number 3. Muir Glen Organic Tomato Basil, no sugar added. The clean mid-tier pick that proves $5 to $6 doesn't have to mean compromise the way it did with Classico. Muir Glen sources its tomatoes from farms in California and processes them under USDA organic certification. The ingredient list: organic tomato puree, organic tomatoes in juice, organic extra virgin olive oil, organic sautéed onion, organic carrot puree, organic basil, sea salt, organic sautéed garlic, citric acid, organic fennel, organic black pepper, calcium chloride, organic oregano. That's technically a longer list than Ragu's or Cento, but almost every entry on it is a real named food rather than an industrial processing aid. And the citric acid here is present in tiny, standard preservation amounts rather than compensating for underripe fruit. Sodium comes in around 310 milligrams per half cup, the lowest number of any brand in this entire video, avoid list included. No added sugar, and the olive oil actually outranks the fillers on the label instead of hiding behind them the way it did in Bertolli's jar. What comes next shows what this same clean approach looks like when a brand pushes every part of it even further. Best option number 2, Ragu's homemade marinara. The one that changed what a jarred sauce was allowed to be, Ragu's traces its identity back to a more than century-old New York restaurant. And the jarred product built its reputation the same way the restaurant did, by having people taste it and struggle to explain why it was so different from everything else sitting next to it on the shelf. The ingredient list explains it in 8 words. Italian whole peeled tomatoes, olive oil, onions, salt, garlic, basil, black pepper, oregano. No sugar, no starch, no citric acid, no natural flavor, no soybean oil anywhere in the formula. For a shelf-stable jarred product sold at grocery scale, that ingredient list is close to unheard of. The texture is loose and genuinely uneven, olive oil visible on the surface, tomato pieces varying in size from spoonful to spoonful because nothing in the process is enforcing artificial uniformity. $7 to $9 a jar, and every dollar of that gap over the avoid list brands is explained by what's actually inside, not by the glass or the marketing copy wrapped around it. Best option number 1, Cento certified San Marzano tomatoes, DOP, not close. This isn't a finished pasta sauce, it's the raw material for one, and that's exactly the point of putting it at the top of this list. San Marzano tomatoes are grown in Italy's Sarnese-Noxerino region near Mount Vesuvius, in volcanic soil that produces a thicker-walled, lower-acid, naturally sweeter tomato than standard commercial varieties grown anywhere else. The certified version carries DOP status, Denominazione di Origine Protetta, a legal designation enforced by the Italian government requiring independent verification of exactly where the tomatoes were grown and how they were processed. That's not a marketing phrase a brand chose to print. It's a classification that can be revoked if the standards behind it aren't maintained batch after batch. The ingredient list: San Marzano whole-peeled tomatoes, San Marzano puree, basil leaf, naturally derived citric acid, salt. 5 ingredients, $3 to $5 a can, depending on the retailer, less than what you'd pay for Classico or Bertolli for a product that starts from a genuinely better tomato. The honest trade-off, stated plainly, this isn't pour and serve. You're simmering it yourself with garlic and olive oil for about 20 minutes. That's more active effort than twisting a lid off a finished jar. What you get back is a sauce you controlled from the very first step, built on the best raw tomato available at this price point, with an ingredient list you could read out loud in under 10 seconds and understand every word of. Here's what this entire investigation actually comes down to. The pasta sauce aisle is built around one goal: getting the jar into your cart before you ever read the back of it. Every front label word, homemade, traditional, old world, vine ripened, exists to generate just enough confidence that the ingredient panel never gets consulted at the shelf. That strategy has worked for decades at scale across hundreds of millions of individual purchases. The 5 brands on the avoid list in this video aren't sitting on every shelf in the country because they make a better product than the alternatives next to them. They're there because they got there first, they stayed familiar across generations of shoppers. And the gap between the front label promise and the ingredient list reality has never been made visible at the exact moment you're standing in the aisle deciding. One action for your next grocery run, and it takes about 30 seconds. Flip the jar before it goes in the cart. If sugar shows up in the first 3 ingredients, the tomatoes going into that formula weren't sweet enough on their own to skip it. If you see a named oil, soybean, or canola sitting ahead of the actual vegetables, that oil is faking a richness a better tomato base wouldn't need help producing. And if natural flavor appears in a product whose entire job is to taste like tomatoes, the tomatoes needed help, and the company sitting behind that label made a specific choice not to tell you what kind. You don't need to become a food scientist to use any of this. You need to read about 9 words on the back of a jar before you decide it's dinner. Quick recap of what you now know that you didn't 10 minutes ago. You know Bertolli is made in America by a Japanese-owned company, not imported, and that its olive oil ranks below its sugar. You know Hunt's leads with high fructose corn syrup ahead of the salt. You know Classico's citric acid is patching an acidity gap the tomatoes didn't close on their own, and that its glass jar is worth more to the price tag than its ingredient sourcing is. You know Ragu and Bertolli, marketed as opposites, are the same parent company solving the same thin base problem with the same category of oil. And you know Prego's own sodium math, straight from its own product page, is the clearest evidence available that the standard jar's numbers deserve a second look before it goes in your cart on autopilot. If there's a jar from the avoid list sitting in your kitchen right now, you've got 3 specific verified replacements to try instead of it. Muir Glen if you want convenience without the sugar and starch. Rouse if you want the closest thing to homemade, still sold in a jar. And Cento if you're willing to spend 20 minutes at the stove for the best raw tomato on this entire list. Tell me in the comments which one you're switching to and what you've been reaching for out of habit without ever actually checking.